Good evening. Tonight, a woman tells us of the vision that brought her back from the brink of death. But first, the story of a man whose bizarre predictions went unheeded until they started to come true. The art of dowsing has long been recognized as a paranormal talent, but the tools of the dowser, the bent wire, the pendulum, are not likely to impress the skeptical. Tonight, we reconstruct one of the most extraordinary achievements in the long history of dowsing. It may even change a few minds.
One night in the winter of 1981, two men left Stewart's store in Lake George, New York State. They were on what appeared to be a routine trip to buy some milk, but on the short journey home, Jack Montgomery and Tom Parks vanished.
We learned about the disappearance on February 15th of 1981 at 6:30 in the morning from the sister, Patricia Montgomery. We had no leads whatsoever, absolutely nothing. We didn't know where these fellows were.
A full-scale search was launched, which continued into the spring, but no sign was found of the men or their truck. And then the story took an unusual turn. The forest rangers decided to call on the help of a local dowser, Ted Kaufman.
Ted has helped me in the past in locating lost persons. We looked for a woman who had Alzheimer's disease, wandered from an RV campsite into a logging area, was lost for 3 days through miserable weather. Ted was called in on the third day and was instrumental in pinpointing where she was.
Ted Kaufman has been dowsing for over 21 years. Whether it's for water or a lost pet, he's always on hand to answer appeals from his home in the Adirondacks in upper New York State.
Well, shall we say, a simple request is help me find my dog. He's missing, or she's missing. Another type of request is, I lost my passport. How can you help me find it? And can you? In the slogan of the Dowsing Society, Indigo Felix, that's my best Latin, it says the fruitful search. Now that means that if you want to, you can search for anything.
Ted spends much of his time dowsing for water, using a divining rod. One beneficiary was the local ski center at Gore Mountain. It had faced financial ruin when it discovered its water supply was being poisoned by a family of beavers.
Beaver had contaminated the water with a waterborne disease known as Giardia, only given by the beaver. So we had to find a new source or close the ski area down.
Desperate to find a new water supply, the manager of the center hedged his bets. He brought in the state engineers, but he also gave Ted Kaufman a call.
We drilled where the geological engineer from the state said to, and we ended up with a mess. Real brackish, yellowish water that wasn't fit for human consumption. We drilled where Ted said to. We've got 82 gallons a minute of beautiful water, and it's crystal clear. You'll never need to chlorinate it or whatever, it's beautiful.
But how did he do it? How could one man with a stick outsmart an engineer with a drilling rig? Ted claims it's all in the wrists and a very simple physical reaction.
Well, one holds a stick, which is in the shape of a Y, like this, in each of the two hands. As one walks over the water source, the stick goes down, and there's a reason for it. Water has minerals in it. The earth has minerals in it. And in physics, it says that if two unlike minerals meet, they cause a reaction.
Dowsing with a rod for water is one thing. It's an age-old technique that has gained credibility in mainstream science. But Ted Kaufman goes much further. He claims to be able to map dowse, to search for objects hundreds of miles away using a pendulum and a survey map.
To do map dowsing, one must clear the mind completely and think of nothing else but what you're doing. You ask questions that can be answered by the pendulum swing. Clockwise for yes, counterclockwise for no. It's really not that incredible.
Map dowsing sounds bizarre, but does it work? Ted Kaufman's greatest test would come in the spring of 1981, in the hunt for the missing men from Lake George. In front of a bemused forest ranger, Harry DeKing, the dowser began his search.
All right, let's see what we come up with. Are they alive? No. Are they in the U.S.? Yes.
You're impressed because you see the reaction of the plumb bob going in one direction or another. And all the time you're wondering, you know, how is he doing this? Is this for real?
Are they in the Lake George area? Yes.
Ted now knew the men were close by. His next stop was Lake George Police Station.
Now watch this carefully. First, I'll sweep the vertical. I want a positive signal that the leading edge is over the location. Ah, draw the line. Now the horizontal. Another line, please. That's it. It's there.
What, there? But that's the middle of the lake. You must mean down by the shoreline near the village or something.
No, that's the location. Right in the middle of Lake George.
When we got done, I just thought he was a little bit of a whack. And I didn't believe everything he was telling me. We deal in evidence. And I wouldn't order a search for that. I just wouldn't order it.
For your trouble.
By the time I reached the door, I could hear laughter. Well, I couldn't blame him for laughing. I mean, it's most unusual map dowsing, and for somebody who's never seen it before, it can be a tickler. But they were having their opinion, and I had mine.
If Ted was to be believed, the missing men and their truck were at the bottom of Lake George. In February, when they disappeared, Lake George was frozen over. Perhaps they'd tried to drive across it. It looked as if the mystery might never be solved.
Tragedy has struck again on Lake George. Last night, the body of Jack Montgomery, missing since February this year, was found by the shoreline.
On April the 2nd, 3 months after the disappearance, the body of Jack Montgomery surfaced in Lake George. It was found barely a mile away from the dowser's map position. The police were staggered.
The lake is 32 miles long and in portions a mile and a half wide to 2 miles. And he picks out a location out of a map, and the body surfaces within a half a mile, I'd say about a half a mile. Is amazing.
Gentlemen, our plan of action. Bob's gonna be secondary diver, Jim's gonna be safety diver.
It's a blue pickup truck we're looking for.
Impressed by the accuracy of Ted's location, the police asked him to douse again for the missing truck, but this time on the lake.
Hi, how you doing?
I tell you, I didn't think I'd be doing this, but then you've surprised a lot of people.
On the 6th of June 1981, he joined Ed Litwer on board a police motor launch. It would be one of the most extraordinary days in the policeman's long career.
We're getting a little closer. Slow down.
Ease it up a little bit. Just do what he says.
Okay, sir.
We were approaching the area. I began to get a signal, stronger and stronger.
I'm starting to get a big pull. Go left. Go left. That's it. Now a little to the right. Stop!
Greg, throw the anchor over now. Okay, guys, go take a look.
Sir, I think I might have hit something.
Ed Litwer will never forget the next moment for the rest of his life.
Chief, we've got it. It's a blue Ford pickup.
I said to myself, wow. And I just couldn't believe that the anchor went into the back of the pickup truck. It was just amazing.
But could it have been just a lucky guess?
I really don't think so. I watched it happen right from the start to the finish. He drops an anchor in the back of this pickup truck in 48 foot of water. Lake is 32 miles long, sometimes 2 miles wide, and he picks this out. I think it's pretty amazing, and I watched it happen.
The truck had been found by an old man armed only with a stick and a pendulum. Ted Kaufman's discovery made headline news, and even the dowser himself admits to a sense of wonder when he hears the story retold.
When I heard this on television, I walked into the bathroom, because it was right in the house, and looked in the mirror, and I said, "Who, me?" And that's just God's truth.
The extent of Ted Kaufman's achievement was brought home to us when we filmed that reconstruction. We had to make several attempts before we managed to drop the anchor into the back of the truck, and we knew exactly where it was. Do you feel you have a guardian angel, someone to watch over you? Well, it's an appealing thought, but unlikely to be put to the ultimate test, unless your life was in danger. Tonight we tell the story of Jackie Greaves, who had a classic near-death experience, one that's happened to thousands of people. The visions, the distant light, the sense of being pulled back to this life. But in Jackie's case, there was something more. There's no doubt that she's lucky to be alive. What is in doubt is precisely what happened to her as she hung between life and death.
The Cairngorm Mountains in Scotland. Climbers come from around the world to test themselves here. Conditions can be as bad as the Arctic, and the notorious weather changes in a matter of seconds. On the 13th of February 1994, Jackie Greaves and her two friends were attempting to climb Derry Cairngorm, one of the highest peaks in Scotland. Between them, they had nearly 50 years of climbing experience. The weather had been fine when they set out, but by the afternoon, it had deteriorated dramatically. Jackie and her companions weren't roped together. They began to lose touch with each other. All three of them were about to walk right off the mountain.
We were walking along the ridge, and there was a whiteout, and I couldn't see sight of the others, and I just fell. I just rolled and rolled. I was just trying to stop myself with my ice axe. At last I jammed my axe in and I stopped. My axe flew out of my hand, my crampons flew off my bag. That's where I was lay. I lay there and decided, I got so cold, I got my survival bag out, got inside it, which wasn't easy, the gales were blowing round me. I lay there waiting, hoping for some help. I didn't like crawling down them because I didn't know what was below me. There was rocks all around me and rocks below me.
Jackie had survived but was stuck on a ledge. She had no way of knowing if her companions had lived. She was lost and alone on an unforgiving mountain. Sergeant Graham Gibb heads the Braemar Mountain Rescue Team. He had hoped that no one would be out that day.
The weather forecast was very, very cold, with quite strong winds, with very low temperatures. It would have been very unpleasant for anyone lying out in the mountain or wandering about lost. About 7 o'clock we got the call that a climber was missing out in the Cairngorms.
The call had come in from a mountain hut.
Hello, Braemar Mountain Rescue Centre.
Sergeant Gibb's team immediately went to pick up the climber and started the search for the other two missing climbers. At this stage, there was nothing to suggest that the search would take them very long.
We set off in vehicles, and on the way up to Derry Lodge, we came across a second member of the party. By the time we got back up to Derry Lodge with the team members, there was no sign of Jackie Greaves.
When I was laying on the slope, I felt very, very, very cold, and the darkness came, and I thought, now how long am I going to be lay here before some help comes?
At night, the temperatures can plummet to minus 30 degrees centigrade. Sergeant Gibb mobilized the rescue team in an all-out bid to get Jackie off the mountain.
We had quite a number of lights, flares, and during the search we would be able to see quite well. At the time we set off, we were quite confident that we would find her that evening.
I saw a snake of lights coming in through the valley. I whistled and whistled, but of course they wouldn't hear me with the gales.
It was an agonizing moment for Jackie, watching as the searchers stayed out of reach. What she didn't know was that, disorientated by the weather, her companions had given the wrong information to the rescuers.
Unknown to us at that point, we were actually searching on the wrong mountain.
For Graham Gibb, the night brought more worries. His rescue teams were putting themselves in danger.
Having been up there myself that night and experienced the conditions, I was quite concerned for them.
For Jackie, it could have been the last night of her life, but she found the inspiration to stay alive from the conviction that something or somebody was watching over her.
All the time I was lay there from falling, there was a light above me. It just kept me going all through the night. It just kept me there. I felt somebody was there with me all the time. So, of course, I wasn't afraid. And then next morning came and it seemed to just fade away. I still don't know what it was. Next morning came and I was so cold. It was either lie there and die or climb down. So I thought, well, I'll take the chance and climb down. So I took my gloves off and came down with my fingertips to get a grip onto the ice. As I got further down, I started walking and wandering, but by then I was exhausted, really exhausted.
Jackie had survived the night, just. But in her desperate attempt to get off the mountain, she became engulfed in a whiteout and was stumbling into more danger.
Everything goes white, the ground's white, the sky's white, and you can't see the edge. You could be walking along, you could think your next footstep was going to land on solid ground, and it doesn't, it lands in midair. There's just nothing to tell what is ground and what is sky.
Jackie was now exhausted and delirious, but again, something intervened to save her.
I was walking along, partly blind, could hardly see, and a barrier dropped, a railway crossing barrier dropped in front of me. I thought, you know, there's going to be a railway station and there would be a phone I could ring for help. I leaned out to touch it and it disappeared and there was a big hole underneath it. Turned round to my right and started walking again, and another barrier dropped down. I reached out to touch that and there was another hole. So I turned round and went the other way. Obviously somebody was telling me the right way to go.
Jackie knew these visions had kept her alive, but only until now. As 90-mile-an-hour winds raged, the temperature dropped to nearly -40. The light was fading, and she knew if she stopped, she would die. But she had no energy left.
I thought, I'm not going to get any further now. I'm just going to lie down here.
Meanwhile, the search intensified. Over 70 people were out looking for Jackie.
We'll be at the summit of Derry-Cairn Gorm in about half an hour, and I'll call you back then. No trace of missing persons so far.
Yeah, Roger, Graham. We've got our way to the north end of Corrie Spute, and it's a negative result, over.
The weather closed in again. Jackie was near to death. What she was about to experience was common to many people on the verge of death. Was it the last imaginings of a dying mind starved of oxygen? Or was it something else?
I seemed to be drifting. It was darkness. And then I was walking, all peaceful, through a beautiful land. Beautiful flowers, trees, blue skies, blue bridges. It was wonderful. And I felt so relaxed and away from all the pain and the cold and the suffering.
The search was called off.
I saw little point in risking people's lives out there in the dark, so I called the teams back late that evening. I was obviously very concerned. If she was lying out in the open, I feared that she may have succumbed to the weather and had perished.
I drifted back into the snow again, but I seemed to have a lot more energy and I was able to carry on. So I crawled and suddenly I decided I'm going to build a snow hole and get inside it. It was very hard work because my fingers were stiff and my body was stiff, was shivering. So I dug frantically to get in it quickly. I knew I had to stay awake all night because I knew if I'd gone to sleep I wouldn't wake up again.
By the time we got to the start of the third day, I decided that to give her a last chance of being rescued alive, I had to get as many people out on the hill as possible.
That morning there were 5 mountain rescue teams, RAF helicopters and highly trained search and rescue dogs scouring the peaks and valleys. But hopes were fading for her chances.
For Jackie to have survived the 2 nights out, I was doubtful if she had. I felt that she should have been dead in the morning.
Well, morning came and I felt I was on the brink of death. Suddenly I saw a light and it lit up a V in the mountains. Quickly put my compass onto it, and that was the right way down.
I saw something moving ahead of us, but it was only a slight glimpse, and I almost dismissed it. At first we weren't even sure if it was Jackie. We'd identified the colour of her jacket, and we thought, my God, that must be her.
As I dropped into the valley, I saw this dog, and the dog started licking me and barking round me, and as if to say, I found you now.
To be perfectly honest, we weren't expecting to find her wandering around. I didn't expect to find her alive.
Looking back on the whole thing, somebody was guiding me right through. I don't know what it was, but without it, I wouldn't have got through.
For the professionals of the mountain rescue teams, Jackie's survival is extraordinary, but explicable.
The weather that was in the Cairngorms that 3 days was some of the worst that you could encounter. For someone to survive in these sort of conditions, they've got to have certain qualities. Fitness, a will to survive, a very strong character. And obviously she had all these qualities.
Jackie herself is convinced she survived because she was not alone.
I never felt alone at all. There was always somebody there. Or there was a sense of somebody there showing me the way to go and what to do and not to be afraid. And I'm sure without that, I would never have got through.
The idea of spiritual guardians is not confined to the Christian religion. The philosopher Socrates believed he had a guardian angel, and the Romans coined a special word for them, genius, although the meaning has changed down the centuries. In America, interest in angels is so great that special clubs are springing up. The Angel Collectors Club even has its own magazine. It's called Halo. I'll be back next week with more stories that are strange but true. Good night.
Next, meet the beast, Sasquatch. Later, our film, Asylum.
Good evening. The most remarkable case of poltergeist activity this century took place in 1977. It occurred in North London, and it's known across the world simply as the Enfield poltergeist. As you'll discover, it was one of the best documented and longest-lasting cases. It provoked a storm of controversy. Was it the definitive proof of supernatural forces, or was it at best a hoax, at worst a fraud? See what you think. We've reconstructed the case from the testimony of witnesses and investigators who were present at the time, including, for the first time, an in-depth interview with the family themselves. It was a warm summer's evening when it all began. Peggy Hodgson had just put the children to bed and was looking forward to a quiet night. She had no idea that her world was about to be turned upside down.
Come on now, go to sleep, it's late. Oh. What's going on with all this noise?
It weren't us, Mum.
I heard you moving around.
It's not us.
Oh, now don't lie, I heard you. Now get to sleep, I've had enough of this.
I saw the noise, Mum.
I don't know, love. Right, all of you, downstairs now. Come on, get your dressing gowns and slippers now.
But where are we going to go, Mum?
I don't know. Come on, let's get out of it quickly. Come on. Billy, come on, help me out.
Peggy Hodgson took the children to the safety of a neighbour's house.
Janet, come on. Come on.
found it really very nerve-wracking. I was trying to keep calm because of the children, you know, not to frighten them more than they already were, but it was very difficult.
No, I can't forget it. I can put it out of my mind now, but only now. But before, I mean, most of like my early 20s and in my middle 20s, I couldn't even talk about it like this. I'd be in tears all the time.
At her wit's end, Peggy called the police. It was WPC Caroline Heaps and a colleague who answered the call.
Well, we've done a complete search of the house, including the loft, and we can't seem to find where the knocking's coming from. But
dear, I'm so sorry to put you to all this trouble, but I was really
Don't worry.
frightened.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Well, I see, I'm on my own. I mean, my husband left last year, and I've got no one else to. And my kids are here, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You see,
there's probably some very simple explanation for all this. It's an old house.
In full view of the Hodgsons, their neighbours and 2 police officers, a chair slid across the floor. The Hodgsons had a sleepless night, and there was no let-up the following morning.
Janet, did you throw that?
No.
Billy? Margaret, was it you?
No.
The fear that went through you, it could bring on anyone older, an heart attack, I think. It was that frightening.
Over the following nights, the activity continued unabated. Within days, the national press had picked up on the story.
No, John Burke and Peggy's brother. I live a few doors down. Thanks for coming. I don't quite know what you can do.
One of the first to arrive was photographer Graham Morris.
They were genuinely upset. I mean, they were sort of frightened. The kids were, all right, a couple of them, I think, had gone to sleep by the time we got there, but all the other people were bristling a bit. They were on edge. So we didn't really know what was happening. And then we were told, bit by bit, what was going on, what had happened.
Hey, fellas, come back. You got to see this. Come on. In here.
Basically, it was down to my reactions if I can catch anything, and then got hit on the forehead by a Lego brick. Well, that brought it home. Yes, it became personal then. But no, it was weird as all these things started flying around. You know, the bits and pieces that were flying around, not just as it hit me, but yes, it was the strangest feeling I've ever experienced.
Into the chaos now stepped Maurice Gross, the local investigator for the Society for Psychical Research. As soon as he arrived, he realised that he'd been handed an exceptional case.
Maurice Gross, Society for Psychical Research.
The atmosphere when I got there was absolutely chaotic. Everybody was in a terrible state. Nobody knew what was going on. And this is one of the good things, as far as I was concerned about the case, is that when I got there, I realised it must be genuine.
Now, Peggy, if I'm to help you with this, I need you to make a record.
The investigator was convinced that a poltergeist had moved into the Hodgsons' home. He knew that his first task must be to try to calm the family's nerves.
It's going to be all right.
Then I explained to Mrs. Hodgson and the children, as best as I could, what poltergeist phenomena was about. Janet made me laugh because Janet didn't even know what it was. She used to call it a polka dice. And I say to Janet, it's not a polka dice, it's a poltergeist. But she didn't get it for quite a long time.
It wasn't long before the investigator had an experience of his own.
Was this the...
I thought, my God, you know, nobody's thrown that because there was nobody in a position to throw it. Now, if you drop a marble on the floor, it bounces. He used to hit the floor and stop, dead. And when you touch them, they were hot. Now, this is typical of all the psychokinetic phenomena concerning small objects that's ever been reported in poltergeist cases, that they were hot.
Maurice Gross then began his own investigation of the family to see who, if any of them, might be behind it all.
Oh, I watched him like a hawk. I brought in my tape recorders, and I had those running all the time. And I watched everybody. And I realised nobody was doing anything.
But did the children never play up? Being young girls and with so much attention, it seems hard to believe.
Well, you two look very comfortable down there.
Of course they played around sometimes. They're children. And any psychologist would tell you that children will imitate what's going on around them. But you can't fool people day after day, week after week, scientists and people coming in and countries, everything, and nobody ever seeing anything done by the children.
As the strange activity continued into September and October, the list of witnesses grew longer and longer. They included David Robertson, a physics research assistant from Birkbeck College, London.
Janet, can you tell me if anything else has been moving around besides all the magazines?
Well, some Lego's been flying around the
That ashtray flew across the room and struck me on the side of the head, quite a blow. And at that time I concluded that I had observed something paranormal and it probably wasn't wise to carry on with that line of experimentation.
Janet and her sister Margaret seemed to be at the centre of the activity, but were they responsible for it? Their uncle believed something was manifesting itself through Janet while she was in a trance.
It actually yanked one of these old-fashioned gas fires literally out of the wall. And at one time, Morris and me were trying to restrain Janet, who seemed to be, I'm no expert, only say in a trance-like state. And the strength was unbelievable.
As summer turned to winter, the disturbances grew more violent. And then Janet started having fits. One night was particularly bad, and the doctor was called.
He thought she was having some sort of fits. He gave her a 10 milligram injection of Valium. Now, a 10 milligram injection of Valium will knock an adult out, let alone an 11-year-old child. And she immediately, more or less, went to sleep, unconscious, went to sleep.
With Janet fast asleep, the adults returned to the living room.
Who's that?
Graham Morris took this picture on entering the bedroom, with the startled John Burkham in the foreground.
There she was, curled up on top of a very old-fashioned type radio set. She was like she was on it. But the amazing thing was, she was asleep.
Over the next few weeks, Graham Morris was able to take a number of pictures even while he was out of the room by pressing a remote control button. The pictures show the children coming out of bed, but are they playing up for the cameras?
The pictures are genuine. There's no doubt about that. What the motive was behind them coming out of bed, I mean, people talk about them levitating. I find that very hard to believe.
It looks like we're jumping, but believe me, I know that there's something pulling us up, and we're in this position where we're so terrified, trying to hang on to something, that mayhem was let loose and we're just trying to hang on for dear life.
The Hodgsons felt helpless, victims of a force they could neither see nor predict.
I did feel at one time we'd got it for life. I thought, well, this is worse than the war. At least the war ended, but this is going on and on and on.
It seemed the family could only wait while the poltergeist planned its next move.
Quite a story, but the greatest drama was yet to come. After the break, the poltergeist speaks, and you'll have to judge for yourselves. Is this the voice of a dead man?
And I fell asleep, and I died in a chair.
By September 1977, the extraordinary goings-on in Enfield were front-page news. Reports were coming in of flying objects, sliding furniture, and possessed children. And it was all going on in broad daylight, in front of dozens of witnesses. How was it going to end?
The Hodgson semi was turning into a war zone. Events were becoming more dramatic by the day. Maurice Gross decided he had to try to get in touch with the force before it did any serious harm. His chance came when the knockings started up again.
I thought, well, if it can knock and it can make all these noises and do things, perhaps we can get some sort of communication with it.
Now, I know you can hear me. I want you to answer 1 knock for yes and 2 knocks for no. Can you hear me? Did you die in this house? How long ago did you live here? Are you having a game with me? That was a very good answer.
I was actually, you know, taken aback. But I was also, my sense of wonderment at the time is, you know, I can't put it into words, but that's extraordinary.
If the knocks were to be believed, the Hodgson's poltergeist was an old man who had died in the house years before. Morris felt he was making progress.
Morris. It's nearly 8.
Oh,
Cup of tea. I'm just going to see the kids.
But then in December, when he thought there could be no more surprises, the most extraordinary episode of the case occurred. It started to speak.
The voice phenomena started on December the 10th. I remember that day all too well. December the 10th, 1977. I was sitting in the room with in the lounge with Mrs. Hodgson and the children, and suddenly a dog barked in the room.
Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it.
Morris. Even I was taken aback. You know, it really was quite a shock to hear it.
The following reconstruction is based on the tape recordings
Everything's
taken by Maurice Grosse at the time.
Everyone very quiet, very still. Where are you in the room at this moment?
On top of Janet.
Why are you lying on Janet's bed? Why can't she feel you?
I'm invisible.
Why?
First of all, I thought it was discarnate voice coming from out of the air, you know, nowhere. Then I realised the voice was coming from Janet. I said, Janet, that voice is coming from you. She says, no, it's not. I said, all right, if it's not coming from you, where is it coming from? She said, it's coming from behind me.
Now, I want you to take a sip of this, but don't swallow it, all right?
The investigators were mystified. Numerous tests were carried out on Janet to try to find the source of the sound.
What is your name?
My name's Bill.
At one time, the voice is going in the room, and I'm talking to the room and asking him to show himself. He's saying, I can't. I'm dead. I said, don't worry about that. I've seen dead bodies. They've got no head. And that type of thing. And it ended up calling me a four-eyed git, go away.
Well, we need to find out where the voice is coming.
It seemed the mystery would be cleared up when the investigators borrowed a laryngograph from the University of London. It's a machine that closely monitors voice patterns.
And we found the voice was not made by the larynx, but by the false vocal fold, which is above the larynx here. And you only use it when you lose your voice and you talk like that. Right. Janet used to produce this voice for up to 3 hours at a time without even any distress whatsoever. Well, you do that for a couple of minutes and you're in dead trouble with your throat.
My name's Bill.
Do you know that you're dead?
Shut up.
Morris tried to find out more about the person behind the voice.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you before you died.
I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
Could this really be the voice of a dead man? For some observers, it was too much. The case seemed to be degenerating into a circus. Graham Morris was one witness who began to have his doubts about the poltergeist.
I'd like to give a good reason why such and such happened. I just thought it got a bit far-fetched with voices. I'm not saying the voices weren't real, just what was being, the interpretation of the voices and just what went on.
Maurice Gross himself came under suspicion, accused by some colleagues of keeping the phenomena going at the family's expense.
Here we were producing evidence for a fantastic case, and at the same time we were able to help the family. Well, what more could we do? Do you know what? One time somebody came along who said, leave the family alone, go away. Everything will be all right. We did it. We went away for 2 days and all hell was let loose. And she was delighted to see us come back again. So what else could we do?
Well, he helped us extremely well. And without his help, I don't think any of us would be here now properly. Not living there, maybe not in that house, maybe not having the life they're having now, maybe not even thinking right.
Maurice Gross was accused of inciting the children, but he wasn't even there when David Robertson challenged the ghost.
OK. Show us what you can do. Margaret, are you all right? What's going on in there?
I saw Janet levitate in front of the windows, and somehow the thing would have her stretched out. You know, it was like she'd been laying on a bed.
At exactly the same time, John Rainbow, a local delivery man, was passing the house. His account is read by an actor.
I remember the curtains were billowing inwards, and a young girl seemed to be floating around in the room, like she was in a bubble. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Hazel Short was on duty outside when she spotted a red cushion on the Hodgson's roof.
My attention was taken to the top window, and I saw Janet floating or levitating up and down, just going up and down in front of the window, flat on her back. I thought she was putting it on. So I went straight home, went upstairs, laid on my own bed, and tried to lift myself up in horrors, and you couldn't do it. No way that I could do it.
Two passers-by who had nothing to do with the family believe they saw a girl levitate. It seemed incredible. How could a young girl have faked such a thing? Maurice Gross remains convinced the children were not responsible.
I thought to myself, well, how can it be the children? Because in the end, the situation was, if it was the children, we had the world's best conjurer there, we had the world's best ventriloquist, and we had the world's best everything, all from a little 11-year-old girl, which was, of course, ridiculous.
By late 1978, the events began to die down as mysteriously as they'd started. Margaret thinks the poltergeist lost its hold over the family as they began to conquer their fear.
Maurice reckons if you showed your fear more, it would attract itself to you more. If something like little did move, I used to be able to say, oh, look, it's moved it again, you know, make a bit light of it, although it wasn't really inside, you didn't feel light about it at all, but not letting it see that you was frightened.
In July 1978, Janet, now 12 years old, was admitted to the Maudsley Hospital. There she underwent psychiatric tests, and the doctors gave her a clean bill of health. While she was there, for the first time, she felt completely calm.
I think it did help her to relax, because when she came out, she was quite excited. She said, her first word she said, they said, I'm perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with me at all. That's the very word she used. And I was pleased to hear it and see it.
Janet was allowed home from the Maudsley, and slowly the poltergeist activity died down in the autumn of 1978. Maurice Gross himself left, confident that the family were at last free of their troublesome spirit. 17 years on, it seems hard to believe that the strange events at Enfield ever took place. But for the investigator on the case, the Enfield poltergeist has changed his life for good.
My belief was very strong, but the difference now is my belief is absolute. That's the difference. Nobody could shake my experiences. With the poltergeist case, it made me realise that what I was doing was worthwhile and it was real.
After the activity died away, Maurice Grosse was left with his recordings and an unanswered question. The mysterious voice had clearly said that he, Bill, had died in the house, but Maurice had never been able to confirm this. And then 3 years later, this letter arrived. A man wrote in to say that his uncle had died in the house, well before the Hodgsons moved in. We've traced his death certificate, and it's true, he did die in the house. His name was Wilkins, William Wilkins. But of course, everyone would have known him as Bill. Good night.
Closest Encounters tells the whole story next. And at 9 we follow...
And later, wines and spirits.
Good evening. Tonight we examine the links, seen and unseen, between twins. Chang and Eng were the original Siamese twins. They were born in 1811, and although they were never actually separated, they led active lives. They married 2 American sisters and ran 2 family homes, spending a few days in each. One had 10 children, the other 12. Chang took to drink and Eng had to share the hangovers. They were joined together by a fibrous band at the chest. Nowadays, they could easily have been separated. But is there another link between identical twins? A telepathic link that can never be broken?
Welcome to Twinsburg, 1995!
Happy Twins Day! Once a year, over 4,000 sets of twins descend on the town of Twinsburg, Ohio. It's the Twins Day Festival, and they all arrive 2 by 2.
I'm a little more outgoing than Bob. Yeah, I'm more quiet. I'll dress up more than him and things like that.
To the observer, identical twins hold a particular fascination. The exact physical likeness. The same hobbies. The same tastes. In fact, there's one restaurant owned by twins that will only employ twins as waiters.
But they have to work at the same time in the same shift. They have to work together. But they'll screw up and blame it on the other one. Or they'll switch their name tags and they wear name tags. I'm Juanita, not Shanita. I'm Charlene, not Darlene. So and our motto in the restaurant is you can only make a first impression once, we make it twice.
But do twins share more than just physical characteristics? Some twins believe they have a closeness that even conventional science can't explain.
We call it twinship, or twin insight. We've experienced it several times. We've been tested to have a high degree of ESP among each one of us. One of the most outstanding one that we've had was when I was in a car accident. And I was able to direct help to her without knowing where she was. I was visualizing it in my mind as it was happening.
There will be times that I'll answer the telephone and say, Jeff, what do you want? And I'm not sure it's him, but I can tell by the ring or something that it's Jeff. I mean, it's amazing.
My first baby, she was down the shore, vacationing. She wasn't due yet. I wasn't due for the baby. She gets up in the morning at 7:30, which she doesn't do on vacation at all. Never. And I couldn't walk. I could not get out of bed. I got out of bed and fell on the floor. Well, I was with my older sister, and she's like, what's with you? And I go, must have been a bad mattress. Now I'm walking like this. Now we call. I go, something's wrong. So we call her husband, and he goes, Jill had the baby. I'm like, she didn't have the baby, she's not due yet. And he goes, yes, she did. And she never told me this story. She felt my labor pains. Yeah. Never told me this story. Now, the second time I got pregnant, I said, I'm pregnant. And she looked at me and she goes, not again.
For identical twins, this is the moment of creation. The egg splits and 2 separate fetuses begin to form. 2 individuals, but with identical sets of genes. Science maintains that at the moment of separation, all links with the other half are broken. But does an invisible connection remain? Dr. Susan Blackmore, who studied twin behavior, remains unconvinced by tales of twin telepathy.
If they're identical twins, they are genetically the same. So their brains are much more similar than most pairs of people's brains would be. And so they think in similar ways. Then there are all the things where twins are brought up together in their own background. And all these things can lead to what appear like the most extraordinary coincidences, but actually they spring from their lives together.
But what if twins had never lived together? What if they were separated at birth? It's from this group that some of the most incredible stories have emerged. On the 19th of August 1939, a woman gave birth to identical twin boys in Bradford, Ohio. Due to family pressure, she was unable to keep them, and she agreed to put them both up for adoption. Four weeks later, Ernest Springer, a maintenance engineer, and his wife Sarah adopted one of the boys. 2 weeks after that, Jess Lewis, a boilerman, and his wife Lucille took the other child away. There was nothing unusual about the adoptions, except for one small coincidence. Both families decided to call their sons James. The twins, it seemed, had been separated for good, identical in every way, but destined to be strangers for the rest of their lives. Over half a century later, James Lewis is now living in Lima, Ohio. He was 6 before he learned he had a twin brother. It would take over 33 years of searching to track him down.
I took the adoption papers to court where the adoption took place, and I told the judge what I wanted to do. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do for you.
Jim Lewis's twin brother, Jim Springer, was also living in Ohio when he received a letter from the adoption agency. It gave him quite a shock. For 39 years, he'd believed that his twin had died at birth.
Well, I was very surprised and everything. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know, whether it was true or it was a hoax. Or I always kind of had a feeling that, he wasn't dead, but yet, all the proof was said that he was, so.
Jim Springer decided to phone Jim Lewis. It was the first time the brothers had spoken.
Strange, very strange. We didn't know what to say. It was short. He introduced himself to me, and he told me what he wanted to see me about and everything. But I do remember one thing funny. He asked me what kind of beer I drank. And of course we both like Miller's Light. And pretty soon, I just blurted out and asked Jim if he was my brother.
What did he say?
Yes.
It seemed a cruel twist of fate, but the twins discovered they'd spent most of their lives living only 40 miles apart. After the initial phone call, they arranged their first meeting. It was February 1979.
It was like standing there looking at myself. I felt very close to him from the beginning. He wasn't a stranger. Wasn't a stranger at all from the very moment I saw him. It wasn't like meeting somebody for the first time. Just like I knew him.
The story might have ended there. Two brothers, separated at birth, happily reunited in middle age. But as the two men began to discuss their lives apart, an extraordinary series of events were revealed.
Good. Got it.
For nearly 40 years, it seemed, the two men had been living parallel lives. The coincidences began in childhood, at school, for example.
I never liked spelling, and I liked math. We liked math. We didn't like spelling.
Back home, both boys came up with unusual names for their dogs.
Toy, T-O-Y. I called it Toy. Now, why I ever named it that, I don't know. That's the name I gave the dog.
The twins left school, and there were more coincidences. They discovered they both enrolled as police officers.
Jim worked for Miami County, I think, Police Department, and I worked for Shawnee Township Police Department. We were both doing the same job at the same time.
The two Jims went on to marry and become fathers. Again, their lives seemed to be running in parallel.
My first wife was named Linda, and my second wife was named Betty. Okay, the first one was Linda, and then my second wife was Betty. Betty and I have a son. We named him James.